"I'm sorry, ma'am. This pass isn't valid." The security guard's voice was loud, catching the attention of the reporters lingering by the entrance. Beyond the velvet rope, the Nashville skyline glittered behind the rooftop bar where my sister Cassandra's $1 million album launch party was in full swing. I could see them, my parents, Frank and Patricia, standing near the entrance. They watched the guard shake his head. They saw the pitying glances from the other guests. And then my father simply turned his back, guiding my mother toward the bar as if he'd seen nothing at all. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot wave that washed over me, blurring the city lights. My VIP pass was worthless. And in that moment, so was I. My name is Leah. I'm 27 years old. And for most of my life, I've been the B-side to my sister's hit single, the rough demo that never made the final album. Just as I was about to turn and walk away, a hand grabbed my arm. "Leah, what are you doing out here?" It was Chloe, my best friend, and the only person in this city who knew my music better than I did. She was a sound engineer at one of the smaller indie studios, and her name wasn't on the A-list for a party like this, but she always found a way in. My pass didn't work. I mumbled the words, tasting like ash. Chloe glanced at the guard, then back at me, a flash of understanding in her eyes. "Oh, for God's sake, come with me." She grabbed my hand, flashed her own laminated pass, probably borrowed from her boss, and said to the guard, "She's with me. My +1. The guard, looking bored now that the spectacle was over, just shrugged and unclipped the velvet rope. The sound of the party washed over me, a wave of pulsing electronic music, tinkling glasses, and the high-pitched laughter of people networking. The rooftop was breathtaking, a sea of white leather couches and glowing fire pits with Nashville's entire skyline laid out like a carpet of diamonds. Servers weaved through the crowd with trays of champagne and appetizers that probably cost more than my weekly groceries. And in the center of it all was Cassandra. She was standing on a low-lit stage, a microphone in her hand, not singing but talking to a reporter from some major music magazine. She looked flawless. Her silver sequin dress caught the light, and her professionally styled blonde hair framed a face that was born for album covers. My face. But a brighter, shinier, more commercial version. My parents stood just off to the side watching her, with the intense focus of stockbrokers watching the market ticker. That's what they were. Her managers, her investors, the architects of brand Cassandra. They weren't just proud parents. They were executives celebrating a successful product launch. Growing up in this family was a constant lesson in market value. I wrote my first song when I was 12. It was a messy 4-chord song on an old acoustic guitar about feeling lonely in a crowded room. I played it for my dad, my heart pounding with a desperate need for his approval. He listened, nodded, and said, "It's a little depressing, don't you think? Nobody wants to buy sad." 2 years later, Cassandra, using the 3 chords I had taught her, wrote a bubbly, repetitive song about a boy she liked at the mall. My parents heard it and immediately saw dollar signs. They hired a vocal coach. They paid for studio time to record a professional demo. My songs were my diaries, full of complicated feelings and minor chords. Hers were jingles, and in our house, jingles sold. I tried to talk to my mom once in the kitchen. She was reviewing Cassandra's new headshots. "That's beautiful, dear," she said, not looking up from the glossy prints. "Now, what was it you were saying?" I felt invisible, a ghost haunting the edges of their brightly lit world. I saw my friend Chloe waving me over from the bar, but I shook my head. I needed a moment. I stepped out onto a smaller, quieter balcony, away from the main crowd. The music was still audible, a dull throb that felt out of sync with my own heartbeat. I looked down at the streets of Nashville. Somewhere down there were the dive bars and small clubs, where I played my music, where people actually listened, where I felt seen. There you are. My mother's voice cut through the quiet. She was holding 2 glasses of champagne. She handed one to me. You shouldn't wander off. People will think you're being antisocial. I just needed some air, I said. Well, your father and I are about to make a toast. You should be there. It's a big night for your sister. She took a sip of her champagne, her eyes scanning the party behind me, probably looking for someone more important to talk to. I tried to tell you how proud I am of the songs I've been writing. I said the words tumbling out before I could stop them. I have a new EP I'm working on. That's nice, honey, she said, her attention already gone. Oh, is that Robert from the label? I need to go say hello? Don't be a stranger, Leah. And just like that, she was gone, leaving me alone with a glass of champagne I didn't want, and the familiar hollow ache of being forgotten. I wasn't the artist. I was just the other daughter. The one who wrote the sad songs nobody wanted to buy. The one whose quiet melodies were always drowned out by the synthetic, auto-tuned beat of Cassandra's success. I stood there for a long time, watching the party move on, without me feeling like a ghost at my own family's victory celebration. Just as I was about to go back inside to find Chloe and leave this whole charade behind, my father appeared in the doorway. Leah, he said, his voice low, I need a word. He didn't look at me. Instead, he scanned the quiet balcony as if making sure no one important was around to witness him talking to me. He stepped outside, closing the glass door behind him, muffling the party's synthetic beat. There's been a problem, he said, getting straight to the point. He always did. Business first. The rental company for the LED screen just called. The main panel is malfunctioning. They need to replace the whole rig. I just stared at him. Okay, that sounds stressful. He finally met my eyes, and there was no warmth in them, just impatience. It's going to cost an extra $2,400 for the emergency replacement. The venue needs the payment up front. I waited. I knew what was coming. I'd been here before. Your mother and I have covered everything else, he said, his voice taking on a slightly more forceful tone. Your sister's career is a family investment. We all have to do our part. I need you to cover this. It wasn't a request. It was a bill. A bill for a party I wasn't even supposed to be at. A party where my own family acted like they didn't know me. $2,400. The words came out in a whisper. That was more than my rent. That was half of my savings. It's a rounding error in the grand scheme of this album launch, Leah, he said dismissively. Consider it your contribution, the least you can do since you're not contributing in other ways. Since you're not a pop star? Since you're not a product we can sell? Since you're just you? The words hung in the air between us, heavy and sharp. I thought about my small apartment, the secondhand furniture I'd found, the careful budget I lived on so I could keep writing my music, my real music. I thought about the $100 I'd spent on a new dress for tonight, hoping foolishly that if I looked the part, they might finally see me. Every instinct in my body screamed, no. Scream it. Tell him how absurd this is. Tell him how cruel. Tell him he has no right. But I didn't, because a part of me knew it was pointless. To say no wouldn't lead to understanding. It would lead to a fight. A fight I would lose. A fight where I'd be called ungrateful, selfish, jealous. They would turn my refusal into another piece of evidence for the case they'd been building against me my whole life, that I was the difficult one, the problem. And in that moment, the thought of that battle, of the emotional exhaustion that would follow, was worse than the thought of losing the money. People who haven't lived in a prison without bars don't understand it. They see the open door and they scream, "Why don't you just leave?" They don't see the invisible chains. For years, my family had perfected this prison. The walls weren't made of steel, but of conditional love. The guards weren't armed with weapons, but with guilt and passive aggression. And I, the prisoner, had learned how to survive. You survive by making yourself small. You survive by not making waves. You survive by swallowing your protests, because the brief, bitter taste of injustice is less painful than the prolonged agony of a fight you can't win. Saying yes, transferring the money, was a survival tactic. It was the cost of a temporary peace. A peace I was willing to buy because I was just too tired to fight. Okay, I said, my voice hollow. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking slightly as I opened my banking app. I typed in the amount, $2,400. The number looked obscene on the screen. A small fortune earned over hundreds of hours of work about to vanish in seconds. I hit send. My father's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, glanced at the notification, and then put it back in his pocket. Good, he said, his tone softening now that the transaction was complete. Now come on, let's get back to the party. The toast is about to start. He opened the glass door and walked back into the bright, loud world where his real daughter was being celebrated. He didn't thank me. He didn't have to. The transaction was complete. I had paid my dues. I had proven my use. I stood there for another minute, the empty champagne glass cold in my hand, feeling the full weight of those invisible chains. He was right. It was the least I could do. Because in their eyes, that's all I was. The least. I couldn't hear the music anymore. Not really. It was just a dull, meaningless pulse. The laughter from the party, the clinking glasses, it all felt like it was happening a universe away. I was floating disconnected. My body was on that balcony, but my mind was stuck on the transfer confirmation screen of my banking app. $2,400. Gone. I needed to leave. Not just the balcony, not just the party. I needed to escape my own skin. I slipped back inside, keeping to the edges of the room, a ghost in a new dress. No one noticed. Why would they? I found a door near the back, marked staff only, and pushed it open. The noise of the party was instantly cut in half, replaced by the low hum of ventilation. It was a maze of gray corridors stacked with cases and coiled cables, a world away from the champagne and sequins outside. I tried doors. Locked. Locked. Then one handle turned. The room was small, forgotten. It smelled like dust and old wood. A few worn-out chairs were pushed against a wall, and in the corner, under a single bare bulb, sat an old acoustic guitar on a stand. It was missing a string. I closed the door behind me, and the silence was so complete it roared in my ears. I sank into one of the chairs, the fight finally draining out of me. It wasn't a loud, dramatic sob. It was just an emptiness, a hollowing out, the quiet, crushing weight of 27 years of being told in 1,000 different ways that I wasn't enough, not the right kind of daughter, not the right kind of artist, not worth remembering, not worth seeing. Just a line item in their budget, a convenient, interest-free loan. The door creaked open. I knew I'd find you hiding somewhere. It was Chloe. She didn't say, "Are you okay?" She didn't offer a hug. She just leaned against the doorframe, her arms crossed, and studied my face with the sharp, knowing eyes of someone who had seen this show before. "He got you for something, didn't he? Your dad. I saw you two on the balcony." I just nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. She sighed, a short, frustrated sound. "How much this time?" $2,400, I whispered. She closed her eyes for a second. "For a broken light." LED screen. I corrected a bitter laugh, escaping my lips. Chloe didn't say, "That's insane," or "You should have said no." She knew better. She knew about the invisible chains. Instead, she pushed off the doorframe and walked over to the corner of the room. She ran a hand over the dusty guitar. "Forget them," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Forget him. Forget all of it, just for 5 minutes." She picked up the guitar and held it out to me. "Play something. For you." I shook my head. "I can't." "Yes, you can," she insisted. "Play that one. The one you wrote in college. Ghost in the Room." The wood felt cool and solid in my hands. An anchor. I hadn't played that song in years. It was too raw, too honest. A song I'd written when I was 19 after a Christmas dinner where no one had asked me a single question. A song about being a ghost at your own family's table. I tuned the remaining 5 strings by ear, my fingers, finding the familiar shapes. Then I started to play. It wasn't perfect. My voice cracked on the first line. My fingers were clumsy on the frets. But I wasn't performing. I was bleeding. Am I speaking words or just breathing air? Does the sound even make it from here to there? Sitting at the table, I'm a photograph, a ghost in the room that no one sees. I poured everything into it, the humiliation at the door, the hollow ache of my mother's dismissal, the cold transactional cruelty of my father, 27 years of being the afterthought, the B-side, the sad song they always skipped. I closed my eyes and sang, not to Chloe, not to anyone. I sang into the dusty silence of that forgotten room, my only audience, the ghosts of 1,000 other unheard melodies. When the last chord faded, I kept my eyes closed, my head bowed over the guitar. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't empty. It was full, full of everything I had just said. I opened my eyes and saw Chloe standing a few feet away. She was holding up her phone, the red recording light glowing in the dim room. She hadn't asked. She'd just done what she does best. She saw a moment of truth, and she captured it. She looked down at her phone, listening to the playback through her single earbud. Then she looked up at me, her eyes shining with a fierce, brilliant idea. "People need to hear this, Leah," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Not the polished version, this version, right now." "What are you doing?" I whispered, my voice hoarse. "You can't post that. My family will." "Will what?" Chloe's voice was sharp, cutting through my panic. "Be mad, Leah. They just watched you get publicly humiliated and then billed you for the privilege. I think we're past the point of caring, if they're mad." She didn't wait for my permission. Her thumb moved with a conviction I hadn't felt in years. She tapped the screen. A small loading bar appeared, filled, and then it was done. "Too late," she said, her voice softer. "Now, it's out there." She placed the phone on the dusty table between us. In the cold blue light, I could see the post on her indie music feed. No picture, no name, just a black square with the title "Ghost in the Room, Live Unedited." The caption was simple. "Sometimes the realest music happens in a back room when no one is supposed to be listening." My first instinct was to grab the phone and delete it, but I was frozen. It felt like I had just jumped off a cliff and the ground was rushing up to meet me. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. Just the low hum of the building's ventilation and the frantic pounding of my own heart. Then a single notification popped up. A like from one of Chloe's sound engineer friends. Then another. A comment from a stranger. "Wow, that hurts." I stared at the words. He'd heard it. He'd understood. Chloe and I didn't speak. We just watched. The numbers weren't big. 10 likes. 20? But they were real. They weren't the manufactured applause of the party outside. They were quiet nods of recognition from strangers in the dark. Chloe's phone buzzed again. A share, then another, and another. The numbers started to climb faster. 50 likes. 100. 100 shares. Comments began pouring in, faster than I could read them. Who is this I need to know? This is the most honest thing I've heard all year. I felt like this my whole life. They weren't just listening to a song. They were hearing a secret. The secret language of anyone who's ever felt invisible. My music, the stuff my parents had called depressing and unmarketable, was connecting with people in a way Cassandra's $1 million album never could. Her music was a product. This was a confession. Then something shifted. A comment appeared from a name I recognized, a popular Nashville music blogger known for his scathing reviews of mainstream pop and his passionate defense of real music. His name was Marcus Kane. His comment was just one word: finally. A minute later, a new post appeared on his own feed. It was a link to Chloe's post. His caption was a punch to the gut. Forget the auto-tuned pop flooding your feed. This is what a heart sounds like when it breaks. Raw, unfiltered, and absolutely devastatingly beautiful. I don't know who she is, but she's the only voice that matters in Nashville tonight. That's when the dam broke. Marcus Kane had over 100,000 followers. His share was like pouring gasoline on a spark. Chloe's phone began to vibrate continuously, a frantic dance on the dusty table. The likes jumped from 200 to 1,000, then 2,000. The shares went from a few hundred to several thousand. The comments became a waterfall of raw, unfiltered emotion. I'm a single mom from Ohio, and I'm sitting in my car crying. Thank you for this. This song is the anthem for every black sheep of the family. Who is this singer? We need an album. We need a tour. We need more. The hashtag #GhostInTheRoom started trending in the local Nashville feed. People were screen recording the audio, sharing it on other platforms. It was spreading, moving through the digital night like an underground wave completely separate from the perfectly curated, expensive party happening just 100 feet away. I felt dizzy watching this thing I had created, this piece of my own pain take on a life of its own. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. For the first time, I wasn't being overlooked. I was being heard. My voice, my real voice, was the one people were listening to. Just as I was trying to process the sheer scale of it all, Chloe's phone lit up with a text message. It wasn't another social media notification. It was from a name I recognized. One of my cousins who I knew was at the party. Chloe's eyes widened as she read it. She turned the screen toward me. The message was short, and it made my blood run cold. Is this Leah? Someone just played this song at the party, and everyone is freaking out. Cassandra is crying. My head snapped up. I stared at the text on Chloe's phone. Cassandra is crying. The words didn't compute. Cassandra didn't cry. Crying was for the weak, the dramatic, the ones who didn't get what they wanted. Crying was for me. She knows it's you, Chloe whispered, her eyes wide. They all know. It had breached the walls. The ghost was in the room. My raw, bleeding confession was echoing through their pristine, manufactured world, and for the first time, they couldn't just turn their backs. They couldn't walk away. They were forced to listen. For a second, a sharp, ugly part of me felt a surge of satisfaction. Good. Let her cry. Let her feel a fraction of what I've felt for the last decade. But that feeling was quickly replaced by a wave of pure, cold terror. What had I done? This wasn't supposed to happen. The song was a whisper in a forgotten room, not a wrecking ball. By the time we left that little room, an hour later, the party was in disarray. People were clustered in small groups, whispering, their phones glowing. The celebratory atmosphere had been replaced by something else: tension, confusion, drama. As Chloe and I slipped out a side exit, I saw my father arguing with a man in a suit, his face a mask of fury. My mother was nowhere to be seen. The drive back to my apartment was silent. Chloe's phone was a constant symphony of notifications. My song, my raw, 5-string acoustic lament, was no longer just a local trend. It was the #1 trending topic on Twitter for Nashville. By the time I woke up the next morning, it was #3 nationally. The critics had found it. Rolling Stone's online blog posted a hot take titled, "In a City of Polished Pop, a Raw Voice Emerges from the Static." The writer praised the song's unflinching honesty and gut-punch lyricism. Pitchfork was less poetic and more brutal. Their review of Cassandra's album, which had been lukewarm, was updated with a new addendum. While Cassandra's album offers a perfectly palatable, if forgettable, collection of radio-friendly pop, the real story of the night was an ND2, unlisted, uncredited acoustic track that is currently burning up the internet. It has more soul in its 3 minutes than Cassandra's entire 40-minute album. The comparison was explicit. It was brutal. It was a declaration of war I had never intended to start. Chloe started getting texts from friends who worked at Cassandra's label. The official line was, "No comment." The unofficial line was panic. Album sales, which were supposed to be stellar, were flat. Radio stations were getting calls requesting that Ghost song instead of Cassandra's lead single. They hadn't called me. Not my father, not my mother, not Cassandra. The silence from my family was more terrifying than any angry voicemail would have been. It was the silence of a cornered animal plotting its next move. They had spent a lifetime controlling the narrative, deciding who was the star and who was the afterthought. Now, for the first time, the narrative was out of their control. Strangers on the internet were telling a different story. A story where my voice was the one that mattered. I sat on my secondhand couch, watching my song, my pain get dissected and celebrated by the world, and I felt a strange sense of detachment. It was like watching a movie of my own life, a life where I was suddenly, inexplicably, the main character. On the second day, an email arrived in my inbox. The subject line was just my name. It was from Marcus Kane, the music blogger. The email was short. "I need to know who you are. And I think the world does too. Can we talk?" I stared at the words, my heart pounding. This was it. A chance to step out from behind the black square of the album art. A chance to claim my own story. Just as I was about to type a reply, my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize, but I knew. I knew who it was from. The message was just 5 words. "We need to talk." Now? It was from my mother. 2 messages glowed on my screen. One from the world offering me a stage. The other from my family ordering me back into my box. For a single paralyzing moment, the old Leah, the B-side Leah, wanted to answer my mother, to explain, to apologize, to make myself small again, in the hopes that they might this time finally see me. But the girl who wrote Ghost in the Room was tired of being invisible. I ignored my mother's text. I typed a reply to Marcus Kane. "I'm ready to talk." We met the next morning at a small out-of-the-way coffee shop. He was older than I expected, with tired eyes that had seen every gimmick the music industry had to offer. He didn't want gossip. He wanted the story. So I gave it to him. Not the angry, tearful version, but the quiet, factual one. The years of being overlooked. The album party. The forced payment. The dusty back room. He just listened, nodding occasionally. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "They didn't just ignore your art, Leah," he said, his voice rough. They tried to monetize your silence. This isn't just a family drama. It's the story of this entire town. It's about a system that chews up real artists and spits out plastic stars. He leaned forward. Are you ready to tell that story? Because if you are, everyone is about to listen. But before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a new text from my mother. It wasn't a summons this time. It was a threat. I know you're meeting with that blogger. If you say one word, you will regret it. We are meeting at my lawyer's office. 4 p.m. Be there. The family wasn't asking anymore. They were circling the wagons. When I walked into that sterile gray conference room, they were all there. My father, my mother, Cassandra, and a man in a $1,000 suit who introduced himself as the labels lawyer. There were no apologies. There were only terms. Leah the lawyer began, his voice smooth as polished marble. We're here to discuss a mutually beneficial solution. The label is prepared to offer you a one-time payment of $50,000. I stared at him. For what? For your silence, he said, without a hint of irony. You will take down the song. You will issue a public statement explaining that it was an emotional moment, a misunderstanding. You will cease all communication with the media. In return, this payment will serve as a writer's credit for your contribution. My contribution. They were trying to buy my pain to put a price tag on my truth. And if I say no, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. My father spoke for the first time, his voice cold. If you say no, we will sue you for defamation, for breach of family confidence. We will bury you in legal fees you can't afford. We will paint you as an unstable, jealous sister trying to sabotage Cassandra's career. By the time we're done, no one in this town will ever listen to another song you write. Cassandra, who had been staring at the polished table, finally looked up. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her expression was hard. You're ruining everything, she whispered. This was my moment. And in that moment, as they sat there trying to legally erase me, the world outside was connecting the dots. Chloe had been texting me updates. My song was being played on indie radio stations. Music forums were buzzing. And someone somewhere had found an old video. A video from a high school talent show 7 years ago. A grainy, poorly lit clip of me 16 years old singing a song I'd just written. Singing the exact same chorus that was now the hook of Cassandra's #1 single. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Chloe. They found it. Leah, it's over. Attached was a link to a tweet from Marcus Kane. The tweet was a side-by-side comparison, the grainy talent show video next to Cassandra's glossy music video. The caption was, "Explosive. Theft in Nashville." This isn't just a story about two sisters. It's a story about plagiarism. Did Cassandra steal her sister's song? I looked up from my phone. The lawyer was still talking, outlining the terms of my surrender. My father was watching me with a look of cold certainty. They thought they had me. They thought they had all the power. I pushed my phone across the table. I think I said, my voice no longer a whisper, "You have a bigger problem than my song." The lawyer was the first one to break. His professional mask so perfectly composed, just moments before cracked. He snatched the phone, his eyes scanning the tweet from Marcus Kane, the color draining from his face. He looked from the grainy video of a 16-year-old me to the glossy high-production music video of my sister, and I watched him do the math, the chorus, the melody. It was all there, undeniable. "This is," he stammered, looking at my father. "This changes things." "It's a lie," my father blustered, but the conviction had gone out of his voice. He looked at me not with anger anymore, but with a dawning, horrified understanding. He looked at me like I was a bomb he had just realized was live. Cassandra was completely white. That was just some stupid song you wrote in your bedroom, she whispered, her voice trembling. It doesn't count. It counts now, I said quietly. I stood up my legs, feeling steadier than they had all week. $50,000, I said to the lawyer, the number tasting like poison. That's your offer for my silence. I think my story is worth a little more than that now, don't you? I didn't wait for an answer. I walked out of that conference room, leaving them in the wreckage of their own lies. I didn't run. I didn't look back. For the first time, I wasn't the one being left behind. I was the one walking away. The panic started less than an hour later. The family meeting, I learned later, from a frantic text from my cousin, had devolved into a screaming match. The label was in damage control. The lawyer was trying to manage a crisis that was spiraling out of his control. The hashtag, stolen song, was now trending alongside Ghost in the Room. They had tried to silence me with money and threats. Now facing a public relations nightmare, they switched tactics. They decided to fight fire with fire. The announcement came that evening. A major Nashville news station declared they had secured an exclusive primetime interview with Cassandra, a chance to set the record straight, the anchorwoman said gravely, to tell her side of the story in the face of these shocking allegations. It's a trap, Marcus Kane said to me over the phone that night. It's the classic PR move. They're going to put her on TV, have her cry, and paint you as the villain. The unstable, jealous sister who's been plotting this for years. Will it work, I asked, watching the city lights from my apartment window. Depends on how good she is, he said. Live television is a high-wire act. There's no safety net. I spent the next 2 days watching them build that high-wire. Snippets of the upcoming interview were teased on the news. It was a song we shared as kids, a carefully selected audio clip of Cassandra's voice played dripping with manufactured nostalgia. I never thought she would twist it into something so ugly. Friends of the family were suddenly giving anonymous quotes to gossip blogs. Leah was always difficult, one read. She was always in Cassandra's shadow and resented it. They weren't trying to find the truth. They were trying to manufacture one. They were building a narrative brick by painful brick, a story where I was the monster and Cassandra was the innocent victim. I imagined the scene in my parents' house. The media consultants, the lawyers, the publicists, all of them coaching Cassandra. I could almost hear their instructions. Cry, but not too much. Look vulnerable. Talk about how much you love your sister. Talk about her struggles. Use the word fragile. Make it sound like you're protecting her from herself. They were scripting her victimhood. They were turning our entire childhood into a set of talking points designed to destroy me. Chloe came over the night of the interview with a bottle of wine and 2 large pizzas. War room provisions, she said, setting the boxes on my coffee table. Marcus was on a video call on my laptop, his face grim. All right, he said, the show's about to start. Whatever happens, Leah, don't react publicly. Not tonight. We watch, we wait. I sat on my couch, a ghost in my own living room, and watched as the local news station's logo filled the screen. The anchorwoman appeared, her expression serious. Tonight, an exclusive interview. Pop star Cassandra, in her first and only statement, addresses the controversy that has taken the music world by storm. Is she a victim or a thief? Her story next. The stage was set. The lights were bright. The world was watching. The only question was who was about to bring the house down. The screen glowed. There she was, Cassandra bathed in the soft, forgiving light of a television studio. They had dressed her in a simple, cream-colored sweater, her hair pulled back, her makeup minimal. She looked like the girl next door, not a pop star caught in a scandal. She looked like a victim. The host, a woman named Maria with a famously empathetic interview style, leaned in her expression a perfect mask of concern. "Cassandra," she began, her voice gentle, "thank you for being here. I know this has been incredibly difficult for you and your family." Cassandra gave a small, rehearsed nod. A single tear, perfectly timed, welled in the corner of her eye. "It has," she whispered. I never thought my own sister would do this to me." Chloe let out a low whistle from the other end of the couch. "She's good," she muttered. She was better than good. She was a professional. For the first 10 minutes, they stuck to the script. Cassandra painted a beautiful fictional picture of our childhood. A story of two sisters who were inseparable, always writing songs together, sharing their dreams. She made it sound like our lives were a constant, collaborative melody. "We always shared our music," Cassandra said, her voice catching. "That little tune. It was something we came up with together years ago. Just a silly little thing. It was our song." I felt a hot, bitter anger rise in my throat. Our song. I wrote that song alone in my room when I was 16, trying to make sense of a world that made me feel like a shadow. She had nothing to do with it. She'd heard it once, dismissed it as too sad, and never mentioned it again. Maria nodded, her face a study in sympathy. "So when you heard it online, this version your sister posted." "I was heartbroken," Cassandra said, the tear finally falling. "That she would take something so personal a memory from our childhood and twist it into an accusation. It felt like a betrayal. It was brilliant, twisted and evil, but brilliant. They had taken my truth and reframed it as a shared memory, making me the one who had weaponized our past." But then Maria shifted. The soft, empathetic questions were over. "So you're saying this was an informal collaboration," Maria said, her tone a little sharper. "Yes, exactly." "Then why wasn't Leah credited on the album?" Cassandra blinked. A tiny, almost imperceptible crack in her composure. It was an oversight. Things moved so fast with the album production. We were going to add her in the liner notes for the physical release. Lee. Sloppy, obviously. "An oversight," Maria repeated, letting the word hang in the air. "But your family did offer her $50,000 for her silence. That seems like a rather large payment for a simple oversight." I saw it then. A flicker of panic in Cassandra's eyes. This wasn't in the script. The lawyer. The $50,000 offer. They hadn't expected the media to know about that. But Marcus had his sources. "That wasn't for her silence," Cassandra stammered. "That was a gift. We knew she was struggling financially. We wanted to help her. A $50,000 gift offered in a lawyer's office contingent on her taking down the song and issuing a public retraction." Maria raised an eyebrow. "That doesn't sound like a gift, Cassandra. That sounds like a settlement." The camera zoomed in on Cassandra's face. The perfect victim was starting to look like a cornered liar. My father must have been screaming at his television. The publicists were probably having heart attacks. You're twisting my words," Cassandra said, her voice losing its soft, whispery quality. "Am I?" Maria asked. "Or is it just that the story you're telling doesn't quite add up?" She paused, letting the silence stretch a moment of perfect, agonizing television. "You know what? Let's clear this up. Let's just listen to them both." My heart stopped. On the screen, 2 audio waveforms appeared. One was labeled Leah, Ghost in the Room. The other, Cassandra, Sunshine and Lies. First, they played mine, the raw 5-string acoustic, the cracked emotional vocal, my pain broadcast to millions. The sound filled my small apartment, and I felt a fresh wave of humiliation. Then they played hers. The slick auto-tuned vocal, the pounding electronic beat, the high production gloss. And then the chorus hit, my melody, my words slightly changed, but unmistakably mine. The same rise and fall, the same haunting progression that I had written in my teenage bedroom. Stripped of the pop production, it was a ghost of my own song. It was theft. The studio was silent. Maria let the final synthesized chord of Cassandra's song fade completely before she spoke. She didn't need to ask a question. The evidence was right there hanging in the air. And that's when Cassandra broke. It wasn't a crack this time. It was an explosion. The years of entitlement, the lifetime of being told she was the star, the sheer arrogant belief that she deserved everything, it all came pouring out. So what? She snapped her voice high and shrill, all traces of the sweet, wronged victim gone. So what if it's the same? It was just some melody she had lying around. It was going nowhere. It deserved a real production, a real artist to sing it. It deserved to be heard by millions, not just gather dust in some old, sad notebook. She was breathing heavily, her face flushed, her eyes wild. She had said it, not just admitted it, but defended it. She had confessed on live television, not with remorse, but with rage. Maria, the host, just stared speechless. The camera held on Cassandra's furious, unmasked face for 3 long, excruciating seconds. And then the screen went black. A commercial for a car dealership started playing. In my apartment, there was only silence. Chloe was staring at the blank screen, her mouth hanging open. On my laptop, Marcus was just shaking his head slowly, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel anything at all. I had wanted the world to hear my song, but I had never, ever wanted them to hear it like this. The screen went black, but the silence was louder than her screaming. In my small apartment, the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. Chloe had her hands over her mouth, her eyes wide with a kind of horrified awe. On my laptop screen, Marcus just stared, his expression unreadable. Well, he finally set his voice, a low rumble. That's a career-ending implosion, if I've ever seen one. He wasn't wrong. The aftermath was immediate and brutal. Before the commercial break was even over, the internet had delivered its verdict. Cassandra Eyes Over Party was the #1 trend on Twitter. The clip of her screaming, "It deserved a real artist," was already a meme spliced into videos, remixed into dance tracks. Her confession wasn't just a clip. It was a cultural moment. The moment a plastic star shattered under the bright, unforgiving lights of the truth. The next morning, the official news started to break. Marcus called me before I'd even had my coffee. "The label dropped her this morning," he said, his voice grim but satisfied. "Morals clause. They're trying to distance themselves from the whole thing. The album is being pulled from streaming services by the end of the day." Pulled. Her entire album, the project they had invested millions in, was being erased as if it never existed. And my song, my sad little song from the dusty back room, it was everywhere. Radio stations who wouldn't have given me the time of day a week ago were playing the raw, unedited recording Chloe had posted. It sounded so out of place between the slick-produced hits like a ghost haunting the airwaves. By Tuesday, it debuted on the Billboard charts at number 47. I stared at my name, my actual name, on that list and felt nothing. It didn't feel real. On Wednesday, it jumped to number 12. Cassandra's song, Sunshine and Lies, plummeted from the top 10 and disappeared completely. By Friday, it happened. Chloe called me screaming so loud, I had to hold the phone away from my ear. You're number one, Leah. You're actually number one. My song. My sad little song about being invisible was the number one song in the country. The lawsuit was a formality. My father's lawyer, the label's lawyer, called Marcus's office. They weren't negotiating. They were surrendering. Full copyright ownership reverted to me. All future royalties, all publishing rights, everything. They just wanted it to be over. They wanted the bleeding to stop. But it didn't. The story was too good. The underdog, the stolen song, the public confession. It was a Nashville fairy tale in reverse. The shiny princess was revealed to be the villain, and the forgotten sister in the attic was the one who had written the magic spell all along. The final verdict, the one that really mattered, didn't come from a chart or a lawyer. It came in a shaky phone call a week later from my cousin, my mother's nephew. "Leah," he said, his voice low, I thought you should know. It's bad here." He described a house in silence. My father, he said, hadn't left his study in 3 days. My mother just sat in the living room, staring at the wall. That $1 million investment in Cassandra's album, it wasn't just lost money. It was debt. They had taken out second mortgages, leveraged everything, convinced they were betting on a sure thing. Now the sure thing was a national punchline, and the banks were calling. "She won't come out of her room," my cousin said, his voice cracking. "Cassandra, she just lies there. The label is suing her for breach of contract. The press is camped outside the house. It's a nightmare, Leah." He was quiet for a moment. "They're losing everything. The house, the reputation, all of it." He was waiting for me to say something. Maybe that I was sorry, maybe that I would help. But all I felt was a deep, hollow ache. An ache for the family I had always wanted, and the one I had just in my own quiet way destroyed. I had won. I had gotten justice. So why did it feel like I was standing alone in the ruins of a house I had never been allowed to call home? The first royalty check arrived in a plain white envelope. I almost threw it away, thinking it was junk mail. When I opened it, the number didn't seem real. It was a string of zeros that my brain couldn't quite process. More money than my father had made in 10 years of construction. More money than I had ever dreamed of seeing in one place. I deposited it with a shaking hand, watching the teller's eyes widen. The number in my bank account, which had been hovering near empty for my entire adult life, suddenly looked like a telephone number. I had done it. I had won. But as I sat in my small apartment, the same second-hand couch, the same coffee table, I'd refinished myself. I didn't feel the elation I expected. I just felt quiet. The victory was a hollow echo in a room that was still empty. I had my name back. I had my song back. But I had lost a family, even if it was one that had never really wanted me. The silence from their side was now absolute. The house was in foreclosure. My father was facing fraud charges. Cassandra had disappeared from the public eye completely. I had burned their world to the ground, and all I felt was the cold ash. For days I did nothing. I scrolled through the articles about me, the think pieces about the music industry, the thousands of comments on my song, and that's when I started to see it. Buried in the congratulations and the praise were other voices. Messages from songwriters in Ohio, from guitarists in Texas, from singers in their bedrooms in California. I write songs like this, but the labels say I'm too niche. Thank you for proving that real music can still find a voice. My family thinks I should get a real job, too. This song gave me hope. They were me, all of them. Ghosts in their own rooms singing melodies no one wanted to hear. They were the artists the industry had deemed too sad, too raw, too unmarketable. The ones who had been told their art didn't count. And in that moment I understood what I had to do. There are two kinds of justice in this world. There's the justice of punishment, which is all about the past. It's about balancing the scales, making sure those who caused pain feel pain in return. It's a justice that ends in rubble and silence. And for a while I thought that's what I wanted. But there's another kind of justice, a better kind. The justice of the sower. It's not focused on the past. It's focused on the future. It doesn't seek to destroy. It seeks to build. It's the ultimate act of power, not to burn your enemy's field to the ground, but to plant a new, better garden in its place. My father and the industry he admired had created a wasteland where only the most manufactured plastic flowers could grow. My victory wouldn't be complete just by watching them fail. My victory would be in making sure that other real flowers had a place to bloom. I called Chloe. I have an idea, I said, my voice clearer than it had been in weeks, and I'm going to need a producer. I spent the next month, not on interviews or talk shows, but at my kitchen table with a laptop and a stack of legal pads. I sketched out a plan, a website, a platform, a place for the unheard. I gave it a name, the Unheard Melody. Its mission was simple: to find and fund talented, independent musicians who had been rejected by the mainstream. We wouldn't be a label. We wouldn't own their music. We would provide grants, connect them with producers like Chloe, and use the platform I now had to introduce their work to the world. We would be a megaphone for the ghosts. The first check I wrote wasn't for a new car or a fancy apartment. It was a $50,000 grant to a 19-year-old girl from Alabama whose voice on a grainy YouTube video made my heart ache. The hollow feeling in my chest was gone. In its place, something new was growing. The #1 song in the country had given me a voice. Now, I was going to use it to amplify others. The studio is small, tucked away on a side street, far from the polished towers of Music Row. It's warm, filled with second-hand rugs and the smell of old wood. Her name is Maya, and she's 19. She holds her guitar like it's both a shield and a lifeline, her eyes wide, with the kind of terror I remember so well. "What if they hate it?" she whispers, looking at the microphone as if it's an executioner. "They might," I say honestly. "Some people will. But the ones who need to hear it, the ones who are sitting alone in their rooms feeling the exact same way you did when you wrote it, they won't hate it. They'll feel seen." I give her a small nod. "Forget everyone else. Just sing it for them." She takes a shaky breath, closes her eyes, and begins to play. A simple, heartbreaking melody fills the small room. Her voice is raw, imperfect, and utterly beautiful. And as I listen, I don't feel like a #1 artist or a label founder. I just feel like Leah, a girl who once sang her pain into the dusty silence of a back room, hoping anyone would hear. My story isn't just about a stolen song or a family that fell apart. It's about a ghost who learned how to be seen. And maybe you know this feeling too. Maybe you're the one at the family dinner who no one asks questions to. The one whose achievements are met with a polite nod before the conversation moves on to someone else. Someone shinier. Someone who fits the mold. Maybe you've learned to make yourself small, to quiet your own melody so you don't take up too much space. You've been the loyal friend, the responsible child, the good partner, always showing up, always giving, and always feeling like you're just on the edge of the photograph, slightly out of focus. People have told you you're being too sensitive, too dramatic. They've taken your passion and called it a hobby. They've taken your pain and called it an overreaction. And after years of hearing that, you start to believe it. You start to think that maybe the problem really is you. Let me tell you something I wish I had known sooner. Your voice is not a burden. Your feelings are not an inconvenience. Your worth is not determined by a committee of people who have never walked a single step in your shoes. You do not need an invitation to be the main character in your own life. So, sing your sad songs, write your strange poems, build your weird, wonderful life, and if the people who are supposed to love you can't hear your melody, then sing a little louder. Not for them, but for all the other ghosts in all the other rooms who are waiting for a voice that sounds like their own. Trust me, they're listening.